Okay. Hello. Okay, yes, now we can start. We are audible now. Just a moment. Now you can start. Okay, so dear all, good evening and good morning to all of the participants. Myself is Monica, and I'm a teaching assistant and visiting PhD at Boston University, US. And I'm also a senior research fellow at School of Humanity and Social Sciences at IIT Indore, India. I welcome you all of to this 5-week online course series on understanding the state of social sciences by Professor Liah Greenfeld. And Professor Liah Greenfeld is an Emeritus Professor at Boston University, US. She previously held the prestigious position of University Professor in Sociology, Anthropology, and Political Sciences. She is a renowned scholar of nationalism, modernity, and the human sciences, with a distinguished focus from a social sciences, with experienced more than 4 decades in the field. Having a doctorate from Hebrew University of Jerusalem and postdoc from University of Chicago, her academic journey reflects a relentless pursuit of excellence. In her early years, she served as John L. Loeb Associate Professor of Social Sciences at Harvard University to visiting positions at MIT, Lingnan University, Hong Kong, and her work has been supported by grants from Mellon, Olin, and Earhart Foundation. She has been honored with fellowships at Princeton's Institute of Advanced Study, the Woodrow Wilson Center, and the German Marshall Fund. Her work of nationalism, from her Nationalism trilogy, Five Roads to Modernity, published in 1992, The Spirit of Capitalism, Nationalism and Economic Growth, 2003, challenged conventional narrative by arguing that nationalism is not a byproduct of modernity, but its very foundation. In her work, Mind, Modernity, Madness, published in 2013, she ventured into the uncharted territory of cultural psychology, examining how the pressures of modern life manifests in mental illness, a work, of course, as provocative as it is compassionate. Over to you, Professor Greenfeld, and thank you for agreeing to this seminar course series. Dear participants, you must note that there will be 40 minutes of talk accompanied by 20 minutes of question and answer round, which you can drop in the chat box or in the WhatsApp group. So, okay, let's begin. We look forward to have a insightful session.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Given that you are here and listening to this, this means that you are interested in understanding the human reality, the actual human world as it exists. Not just finding a job or making a career, as very many people in the social sciences want, because social sciences are a good way for an easy career, but I presume you actually want to understand things. You must be also, you are probably dissatisfied with the state of the social sciences. or at least that discipline which is your own in the social sciences. Because social sciences, all of them, do not help you to understand anything. Studying social sciences, you probably acquire a certain jargon. You know how to formulate certain acceptable sentences, certain required sentences even. But if you think about that, it really doesn't help you to understand anything at all. Anything that you might be really interested in understanding in reality. So in this very short course, I want to help you first to understand why the social sciences are so disappointing and what is the way to reach understanding of the existing human social world. In our discussions, I hope to acquaint you and discuss with you such things as humanity, mind, culture, civilization, nation and nationalism, and social institutions. You have already some preliminary readings, and I hope you'll ask questions about the lectures and the readings. I hope the readings would help you to understand the lecture. But first, we have to define certain concepts which would allow us to start our discussion. In our context, concepts are specific meanings captured by specifically designated words that we decide should convey these meanings. So, for every meaning that is important for us, we would have one specific word. Here it should be mentioned that the attitude to language is different in such different civilizations as the Western civilization, which I represent, and the Indian civilization. So this is not easily understood what we do with concepts. In the West, at least for people who think, and of course not very many people in the West think, a word usually designates one category of phenomena which is qualitatively different from any other category. Qualitatively different, this qualitative difference actually defines categories. Within each category, there may be varieties, but you cannot combine, according to the Western thinking, you cannot combine categories within one definition. Now, not so in India. In India, this is not how we use words. For example, think about the concept that is the word that captures a meaning, justice. In the West, justice has a simple definition, or at least originally it had a simple definition, that the rewards and punishments of life should be apportioned in proportion to the good and bad things the individual does. So when the individual gets from life what he or she deserves, this is just, whether it is a reward or a punishment. And when the individual gets something he or she doesn't deserve in rewards and punishment, this is not just. Compare this to the word nyaya that is translated as justice. What does nyaya mean? It means method, manner, way, rule, system, plan. This is in addition to justice. It means fitness, propriety, decorum. All in addition to justice. It means law, virtue, equity, righteousness, honesty, and so on and so forth. There are many, many meanings that the same word and different meanings that the same word may carry. In this class, we'll take the Western attitude to language. This is not because the Western way is better than Indian, but because for the task that we have, it is the only way that can help us to accomplish this task. If we, for example, understand the actual empirical reality of human world, if we had some other task, for example, live a good life, it probably would be the Indian way that would be better for that. But in this case, we must use the rules of the Western civilization. And later, as I told you, I hope we will discuss the civilization in greater detail. So first of all, we'll have to define understanding itself, because as you probably feel, even this concept may be understood in various ways, but we want something precise. And in this case, we refer to the etymology of the word. Understanding. What we want to discover when we want to understand, we want to discover the basis of phenomena. What is under the phenomenon that is standing in front of us? And here we are interested in the reliable understanding of empirical human social phenomena. Empirical means phenomena that we actually experience. This comes from the Greek word for experience, empirical, right? And we want this understanding to be reliable, that is objective, the same for everyone. This is what we want to achieve. From historical experience, that is empirically, we know that the only way to achieve reliable understanding of empirical phenomena of any kind is through science. When we speak about science, what immediately comes to mind are, of course, physics and biology. So let us define science. What distinguishes physics and biology from other kinds of intellectual endeavor? These sciences study empirical reality. Physics studies matter, material reality. And biology studies life. Biology is the study of life, organic reality, not material reality. They study those two different realities, even though our experience is necessarily of both of them, by the method of conjectures and refutations. This is the scientific method. What does this mean? It means that our conjectures, our guesses, are formulated logically as hypotheses to allow comparison with reality, that is, with data. Now, logic here is also extremely important. We use the word logic to talk about the logic of non-contradiction. That is the way of thinking founded on the principle that a thing cannot be and not be at the same time. So this is the way of thinking that is in general privileged in the Western civilization. This does not mean that people in this civilization are very good logicians. In fact, the great majority of them are very terrible logicians. They cannot think. But the civilization in general privileges this way of thinking. In India, this way of thinking is not privileged. There are numerous other ways of thinking. But Indians can be very good logicians when they need logic in the specific area in which they may work. For example, if you need logic in science, and in science you absolutely need logic, then Indians can do this as well as anybody. This is like applying the rules of chess to the game of chess. Without those rules, the game would not exist. You cannot change the rules and still play chess. So it is the same with science. Why so? Because when you compare your logically formulated hypothesis, that is, hypothesis with very clear definitions, to the data submitted to the test of evidence, it is very easy to encounter contradictions in the evidence. And if there is a contradiction with evidence, which in fact what you want to see, you must refute your hypothesis. You must admit that your guess was wrong. If you refute one hypothesis because of a specific reason, that is where you find the contradiction, naturally, this leads to a new guess, a new conjecture, which you also formulate logically and submit to the test of evidence, building up on your mistakes to achieve a great approximation to the understanding of the empirical reality. So science is the only intellectual enterprise which allows us, because it is based on the logic of no contradiction, it allows us to constantly build up towards better and fuller understanding of those realities that we want to understand. Science is a modern phenomenon. In this understanding, as we just defined science, it did not exist before the 17th century. I must ask time. How?
11:25. You still have 15 minutes.
Uy. This is not much time. So why it only emerged in the 17th century? This is a very interesting subject, but we cannot go into it. Because before that, in the Western civilization where science emerged, people were not interested in the empirical reality. They were also only interested in transcendental reality, the reality that had to do with empirically inaccessible phenomena such as God. So only in the 17th century, and I will just hint to you, because of the emergence of nationalism, empirical reality became significant. And so people started applying logic, which they valued for all the time of the existence of this civilization. They started applying logic to the empirical reality. It was the easiest to apply logic to material reality, because in Western philosophy, it was believed that reality consists, all of our reality consists of matter and spirit. This wasn't so in India. The fundamental belief in India is very different. But here we believed that reality consists of matter and spirit. So physics that concentrated on the empirical material reality didn't meet any philosophical problems, just concentrated on matter. Spiritual reality, which everyone admitted existed, was empirically inaccessible. It was like God, somewhere transcendental. So empirically, you couldn't study that. Therefore, for a very long period of time, there was only physics as science. Then, later, biology emerged. Biology, which until late 19th century was caught in a philosophical vice between being considered material, reducible to matter, life, in which everyone was very interested, was considered to be material, which couldn't be proven empirically and couldn't be justified logically. And it was caught between this or being considered spiritual. But spiritual was not empirically accessible. So as a result, the science of biology could not develop. And then Charles Darwin proved through the law of evolution by means of natural selection, which was fundamentally an historical law, that all of life had laws that were consistent with physical laws because they only existed in the conditions of physical laws, but at the same time completely irreducible to those physical laws. That the law of evolution through natural selection had absolutely nothing to do with any physical laws. And so we understood that the reality of life was empirical reality and could be scientifically studied, but it was not a material reality. Indeed, it was organic, which is a reality with a completely different kind of causality from the material reality. This is called, in philosophy, an emergent phenomenon. It was realized that life was an emergent phenomenon. At a certain point, it emerged in conditions of material reality, but at a certain historical point, completely changed, separated from it, completely changing its laws of causality. Of course, people always were very, very interested in human reality. This is the reality that we constantly come into contact with more than anything else, even more than the reality of our bodies. What really unhappy, what regulates it are the humans. So we were always very interested. But like biology, we have been caught in the same philosophical vice, believing that it is either material, and some silly social scientists still think it is material, and therefore is reducible to the laws of physics, or it is spiritual. So in social sciences, the distinction is real and ideal. Either it is real, it really exists, or it is only imaginary. And then there is nothing to study. It cannot be studied empirically. So, being caught in that, after biology emerged, there was a way out of this vice. We could then start a human science. And there were two people in Europe who recognized that and actually wanted to start this science. Those were Durkheim in France, Emile Durkheim, and in Germany, Max Weber. Unfortunately, they didn't live long enough to define what kind of reality humanity belongs to. They had a suspicion, very clear suspicion, that it had to do with the human mind. But they never developed this thought. In the meantime, in the United States, the development of such a science of humanity as being something connected to the mind was simply prevented. It was prevented by the institutionalization of the social sciences as sciences in the American research universities, a new institution which emerged in the very end of the 19th century. It emerged because people, reformists, people of the upper class in the United States, of the American cultural elite, wanted to have the authority over society. They went to study in Germany. And in Germany, they discovered the position of a German professor, in particular professor of history. History clearly had to do something with human reality. So they very much wanted to institute such a position of a professor, which didn't exist as yet in the United States. They wanted to institute it in the United States and have it. At that time, when they returned from Germany, at that time, some very rich men, capitalists, a new class, became very industrialists, became very interested in science, specifically in physics and chemistry, chemistry being a subdiscipline of physics, because it helped enormously in business. And they wanted to establish places where science, physics, and chemistry could develop. They wanted to give money to promote such science. And they did give lots of money to promote science. At the same time, the emergence of biology made the prestige of science skyrocket and outran the prestige of the church. Science became the most important intellectual authority. So using all that, those Germany returned members of the American elite, they went to those rich businessmen, industrialists, and told them that they would very happily cooperate in the creation of special institutions for the promotion of science. And it was clear that they would include their physics and all the disciplines related to physics, biology, and all the disciplines related to biology, and they said social sciences. And they called themselves social scientists. They took the name of science, but they knew nothing about science. They didn't know what it was. They were also not interested in science. They weren't interested in at all in trying to understand some sort of empirical reality with the help of the method of conjectures and refutations. They didn't know that there was such a thing of scientific method, and in any case, they didn't want to do what scientists wanted to do. They wanted to have political and moral authority. Since nobody understood what they meant, certainly not those industrialists who were just happy to give a lot of money for the establishment of such institutions, they were allowed to do as they wished. And as a result, in the American universities, in the new American universities, which became the model for all the other universities in the world, there emerged such a division of disciplines called social sciences, that is, using the name of science, which were not sciences at all, which were simply ideological. They wanted to establish a certain subjective view of reality, not to study reality. They were activists. They wanted to change society rather than understand it. And as a result, a human science, the science actually oriented towards the understanding of human reality, like Durkheim and Weber suggested in Europe, could not develop. So there was a specific historical reason why the social sciences, as we know them, are so disappointing. So I suppose this is the end of
okay.
yeah, and now it is time for questions. And next time we'll start with the definition of humanity and what is human reality.
Thank you, Professor. So I can see we have a lot of questions, and I'll start with Dr. Minarul. He said that greetings, this lack of universality in defining a concept is a challenge in social sciences as a discipline. I would like to have your observation on it.
This lack of universality in
universality.
defining
Yeah.
concepts.
And You
Uh,
can briefly
yeah,
discuss.
there is, um, this is a very, very good question, a very complex question. Yes, we exist, humanity exists in three completely different varieties. Those are the three great civilizations that still exist today. We are going to talk about that in detail later. And for this reason, people belonging to those different civilizations, we see reality differently. As we see reality differently, we experience it differently. So even our empirical knowledge is different. But if we realize that, and if we decide on a common project, for example, we can still understand each other. So I all the time give the example of the game of chess. Let's say a scholar from India and a scholar from here, from Boston, decide to play a game of chess. We can play a game of chess very well, even though we come from different civilizations, because we understand that to play the game of chess, we have to know the same rules. Without those rules, there would be no game of chess, and we wouldn't be able to play together. So when we decide on a common project, for example, understanding humanity or understanding material reality or understanding life, you see, we decide how to define concepts, which rules to abide by while doing this common project. And our initial lack of universality in concepts is no longer an obstacle for us. We just decide this is what we want to understand. Whatever before the common project you called a tree or a planet, it doesn't matter for me. We'll just decide that for our common project, we'll agree on certain specific definitions. And the same goes for human reality. And we'll also, and this is the most important, we'll decide that the cardinal rule of this project or this game that we are going to play together is the logic of no contradiction. That is, in order to achieve our common project and do this together, we must agree that we will use the logic of no contradiction, which means if we find a contradiction in this project, we immediately take care of that. At the same time, in my reality, I would be bothered by contradictions that occur irrespective of what our common projects. I would be bothered by contradictions that I may find, I don't know, in my house, in my kitchen, in any relationship I have, you see, but you won't be, because this is you, and you do not privilege this way of thinking in life. However, in our common project, we will share this way of thinking. I hope that I answered your question.
Mm, yeah, so there is a related questions. I think you have already covered it. It says that thank you, Professor, from Ajay Deni. Is logic and empiricism affected by ideology?
Ideology is a contradiction of logic and empiricism. So they cannot be affected by ideology. Ideology is the opposite of what we want to achieve through logic and empiricism. You see, logic and empiricism allow for objective things. That is, it would be the same for everyone. Logic is the same for everyone. And empirical facts are the same for everyone. Ideology, in distinction, is subjective. It serves some interests of some and goes against the interests of others. Therefore, ideology never can affect logic and facts. Logic and facts is the best and only way to fight an ideology.
There is a next question from Yashri. She said that I still don't understand the dichotomy of Indian Western ways of thinking and the basis on which we would lay emphasis on the latter as compared to the former. You would like to address this in this lecture or maybe
Okay, well, again,
in briefly you can
yeah, very
discuss.
briefly, so it wouldn't be very satisfactory, because this is a very, very important question. There is no dichotomy, because to begin with, we must always talk about three civilizations. There are now three civilizations in the world. They coexist and they divide the world. All the cultures in the world belong to one of those three civilizations. How do we distinguish them? We distinguish them according to their first principles. Some ideas and values that are completely natural to people in this civilization, in a particular civilizations, and according to which they view and experience reality. Now, about our civilization and your civilization, I can tell you the main difference in those first principles is that you believe in a Brahmanic world. You believe that the world is one kind of in which everyone shares, right? And the soul, there is one soul, and this soul kind of pieces of it may be given to certain bodies, and then they may travel to other bodies when those bodies die. And the whole purpose of it all, that they would return and become again one with the Supreme Soul, right? With Brahman. This is a very interesting principle. Now, we believe fundamentally, that the world is created by one supreme intelligence. We are not part of this intelligence. We are creatures of this intelligence. And because it is created intentionally by this one supreme intelligence, which most of us call one God, this world is created logically. It reflects the consistency of this one intelligence and its design. So those are very different principles. When we discuss this in detail, you will see what tremendous differences this creates in every sphere of life. Your fundamental belief and our fundamental belief.
There is another question from Vanshika Dubey. She said that many early social theorists tried to model their disciplines on physics or biology, as you mentioned. Do you think this helped or hindered the development of truly human-centered sciences?
Yes, you're right. It hindered it. It's hard to say to which enormous extent it hindered it. Why? Because only people who didn't understand at all what is science as such, they would try to deal with human beings as if they were planets. They didn't understand those pretend social scientists. That science, that the scientific method is not a specific methodology which one applies to a specific subject, but a very general attitude that leads to conjectures and refutations. Conjectures about the subject you want to understand. They thought that the scientific method is simply copying, mimicking what physicists that everyone recognized as great scientists, that physicists are doing. So they thought, they're very quantitative. So we must be as quantitative. And this led to the insistence and the fetish, the worshiping of quantification in dealing with human affairs. But the most important thing, which allows for your imagination to come up with good conjectures, with good guesses, is to understand what kind of subject you are dealing with. If you think that people are just like planets, this would limit your imagination completely, like planets or like stones or something like that. That this would limit your imagination rather than allow you to imagine something. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. It prevented the development of science of humanity.
There is another question from Swati Avana. It says that, Professor, how does this contradiction between Western and Indian traditions or notions affect contemporary development in the sphere of social science research? There are lots of questions.
Mm-hmm. But we cannot deal with all of them.
No, we'll just do.
Yeah. First of all, there is no contradiction between Indian civilization and Western civilization. And none between the Chinese civilization and Indian civilization or Western civilization. There are no contradictions. To begin with, you see, in Indian and Chinese civilizations, contradictions are no problem at all. You don't react to them as contradictions. It is only in our civilization where we are bothered by contradictions. And this is because of our first principles, while both in China and in India, first principles do not let people at all to be concerned about contradictions. However, most of social sciences, I mean, in fact, all of social sciences today derive from American social sciences. And those are not sciences at all. They cannot achieve anything. They cannot help us to understand anything. Among other things, they don't help us to understand the differences between civilizations. And Indian social sciences are as influenced by those social sciences that were institutionalized here as any other. So we are all being led, as they say, on a wild goose chase. You see, away from our scientific goal, which is the goal of understanding of the real human world. Whether it exists in India or here, doesn't matter. Okay, yeah, I suppose. But what shall we do with other questions?
It's okay, you can do it in person.
Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you all. Thank you for this active participation. And I think we can take more question later on, maybe in the next session if we will have time, because it's already going to be 1 hour. And thank you, Professor Greenfield, for having your time and giving your time to Indian audiences. Thank you. So we are going to end this stream and see you all in the next session. Thank you.